You know, I talk a lot about the future, and I talk a lot about, what's coming next, and, you know, people say, you must be a prophet, you must be a soothsayer, you know. There's no profit in it, no money in it at all, but, and I'm not a prophet, I'm not a soothsayer. I don't run around going, I don't, you know, all I do really is I try and look at the trends. So I look where we've come from, and I look where I think we're going to. I talked today about the Horizon Report, which I was a member of the panel of last year, the 2011 Horizon Report, which tries to predict what the technological trends are going to be in higher education, further education, business, and information management. And what we try to do is, the panel of experts, we get together virtually and we try to discuss what we're seeing coming in the next year that's going to be widespread, the next 2 to 3 years, and then the next 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. And normally, it's interesting because the predictions are fairly accurate for the first year. When it comes to 2 to 3 years, it becomes a little bit dodgy, a little bit patchy. We can be right, we can be wrong. But when it comes to 3 to 5 year predictions, we are obviously, usually, hopefully, right off beam. You know, and that's an incredibly important thing to understand. That so many years down the road, you cannot predict what's happening because, as Ray Kurzweil said recently, change isn't linear; it's exponential, and it's going to go up in a curve, and it's going to go in different directions. We can't really predict the future, but what we can do is predict some of the trends. So what I've been talking about today is things like learner analytics, the ability of using tools like Google Analytics to predict how the trajectory of learners' progress and when to intervene, when to bring in new content for them, when to change their direction and so on. And also things like augmented reality, which is always on the table, the idea of enhanced vision, the idea of projecting more content onto the real world so that you've got more information about what you want to do, make choices and so on. And I've been talking about other things which are much more prosaic than that, things that we know already exist in, fairly abundantly, things like mobile learning. Probably one of the most interesting ones for me is one I've been blogging on recently, which is games-based learning. Now, although there's not a lot of this happening at the moment, there will be a lot more of it happening soon, I think, because games-based learning, for me, is not just a fun thing. It's fun for learners to get involved in, but more than that, it becomes addictive. It becomes a hook thing. They get involved in it to such an extent that it becomes a really important tool for their learning. Now, what I've been doing recently is trying to look at the principles behind this games-based learning. And I've gone to the work of James Paul Gee and people, commentators like Graham Brown-Martin, and I've taken what they've been saying and I've encapsulated it today in this presentation. And one of the important principles is what we call the psychological moratorium, the idea that you can suspend reality. You can get away with murder, literally, and not be prosecuted for it. By that I don't mean shoot-'em-up games. I mean, you can make mistakes and learn from them. You can carry on making mistakes and carry on trying the same thing over and over again, asking the questions, taking the risks, solving the problem, and eventually you come to the point where you've got a solution, then you move on. That's a hugely important transferable skill for the 21st century learner. There are other games-based learning principles, like the idea that you can project your identity and invest your own personality into the game as well. So there's a lot to think about in terms of learning and what's coming on the horizon. So that was today's presentation. There you go.